Maria had spent years moving quietly through the corners of Taylor Swift's world. She wasn't part of the stage lights, the interviews, or the roaring crowds. She was the one who made sure the house stayed in order when Taylor was away. The one who folded fresh sheets, who brewed coffee before dawn, who slipped in and out of rooms without being noticed. She never sought recognition. Her pride was in doing her work well, in making life easier for someone she admired from a distance. Her life was not one of hardship anymore. Working in Taylor's home gave her stability she had never known before, but it was still far from glamorous. While Taylor flew across oceans and lived under stadium spotlights, Maria lived in a modest apartment outside the city, sharing laughter with neighbors, cooking her own meals, sending part of her paycheck back to her family. She wore simple clothes, carried the same handbag for years, and saved carefully for small joys that most people would overlook. But what made Maria remarkable was not her circumstances. It was her heart. She had spent most of her adult life giving to others, paying for her younger brother's school books, helping her parents repair their old home, putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. Even when her own dreams had to wait, she carried herself with quiet grace. When Maria met Daniel, she wasn't swept into a fairy tale. Their love grew slowly, built on long conversations, shared responsibilities, and the comfort of two people who understood struggle. Daniel wasn't rich. He worked long shifts as a mechanic, but he had a warmth about him, a way of making Maria feel seen. Together, they didn't dream of luxury, they dreamed of building a life filled with honesty and love. So when their wedding day finally approached, Maria planned it the way she had lived her entire life, with humility, gratitude, and care. There would be no chandeliers, no designer gowns, no glimmering halls. Just a small community venue, decorated with the help of cousins and neighbors, filled with people who truly loved them. And for Maria, that was enough. Still, in a quiet moment, one evening, she found herself writing out an invitation to someone she never expected to see there. She addressed it carefully, her hands trembling slightly. It was not out of duty, not out of hope for spectacle, but out of the simple wish to include someone who had been, in an unspoken way, part of her journey. She sealed the envelope and sent it, knowing full well that Taylor Swift's life was too full, too demanding, too far removed from her own. Maria never told Daniel or her family, because she didn't want to look foolish. She didn't want anyone to think she truly believed a superstar would walk into her modest wedding hall. For Maria, the act of sending the invitation was enough. It was her way of saying thank you for the stability, the respect, and the quiet encouragement she had found while working in Taylor's home. She never expected anything more. What she didn't know was that somewhere far away from her little apartment, Taylor Swift had opened that invitation and paused. The morning of Maria's wedding arrived quietly, without grandeur, but with a kind of beauty that can't be bought. The sun filtered softly through the windows of her small apartment, casting golden light across the simple veil that hung on the back of a chair. Maria woke early, her heart racing, with equal parts nerves and joy. Her sisters and cousins filled the room with chatter, pinning her hair, adjusting the delicate lace of her dress. It wasn't designer, it wasn't expensive, but when Maria looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. She didn't see the housemaid, who spent years tidying other people's homes. She saw a bride, radiant, trembling, and ready to step into a new life. The ceremony was held in a modest community hall, not far from where she had grown up. Friends and family arrived, carrying trays of food, vases of flowers, and laughter that echoed off the plain white walls. Every decoration had been crafted by hand, paper garlands, candles, little details, woven together by people who loved her. It was far from a celebrity wedding, but it felt alive, with something richer. Daniel stood at the altar, tugging nervously at his tie. His friends teased him, his mother wiped her eyes, and he kept glancing at the door, as if counting the seconds, until Maria walked in. When she finally did, the room stilled. She wasn't draped in jewels, or surrounded by cameras. She was simply Maria, smiling through tears, her hands trembling, as she reached for the man she loved. The vows were exchanged, the rings slipped onto shaking fingers. Applause filled the room as they sealed their promises with a kiss. And for a moment, Maria thought her heart couldn't hold any more happiness. This, she believed, was the pinnacle of her life's story. A moment that no one could ever take away from her. But in the quiet corner of her mind, she remembered the invitation she had sent weeks earlier. She hadn't told anyone about it. She didn't want to invite ridicule or raised eyebrows. Taylor Swift attending her wedding? Impossible. And yet, as the celebration continued, people clapping, music playing softly, Maria caught herself glancing at the doors. At first, she scolded herself for even entertaining the thought. But then, something shifted. A hush spread across the room, starting at the back rows. Conversations faded, laughter fell silent, and a ripple of confusion passed through the guests. Maria frowned, not understanding. She followed the direction of her sister's widened eyes, her cousin's hand covering her mouth, her uncle froze in mid-sentence. And then, in that fragile pause, the doors of the hall began to open. And for a heartbeat, no one dared to breathe. Then, framed in the doorway, stood Taylor Swift. She wasn't surrounded by cameras or an entourage. She wasn't dressed in glitter or wrapped in the spectacle of her fame. She was simply Taylor. Her hair loose, her dress understated, her smile gentle but steady. And for a moment, the room didn't know how to react. Gasps spread like a wave. Guests clutched their mouths, some whispered her name in disbelief. Others stood frozen, too stunned to speak. Daniel's eyes widened. But it was Maria, who could not move at all. She stood rooted to the floor, her lips parted, her heart pounding, as if the world had tilted off its axis. Taylor walked into the hall, with quiet steps. Her gaze locked on Maria. And when she reached her, she didn't offer a distant wave or a polite handshake. She opened her arms. Maria fell into the embrace, trembling, tears streaming down her face. The woman she had admired for so many years, the one she thought would never cross into her small, ordinary world, was holding her like family. "You invited me," Taylor whispered softly, her voice breaking the silence, "and I couldn't let you begin this new chapter without knowing how much you mean to me." The room erupted in applause. Some guests openly crying, others shaking their heads, as if they still couldn't believe what they were seeing. Maria tried to speak, but her voice failed her. All she could do was cling tighter. Taylor hadn't come empty-handed. With a nod to a staff member, waiting discreetly at the back, a guitar was brought forward. She took it gently, settled onto a chair, and let her fingers brush across the strings. The first chord rang out, soft and trembling, and her voice carried through the hall like it was meant only for Maria and Daniel. The room fell silent, guests leaning closer, forgetting everything else, as the music wrapped around them. For those few minutes, the modest hall became something sacred. Maria wept openly, clutching Daniel's hand, as the song washed over them. She had never felt so seen, so valued, so loved. And when the final note lingered and faded into silence, no one clapped at first. The moment was too holy, too fragile to break. Only after a heartbeat, the room erupted in applause, mixed with cries and laughter. Taylor placed the guitar aside and returned to Maria. She held her hands tightly and said, with a voice thick with emotion, "I couldn't miss this. Not after all the love and care you've given. Being here with you feels beautiful." Maria collapsed into her arms once more, sobbing into Taylor's shoulder. For the rest of the night, the wedding carried on with joy. But people knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. It wasn't just about Taylor Swift showing up. It was about the way she had stepped out of her world to honor someone who thought she was invisible. Years later, people would still speak of it. The night a superstar chose love over distance, humility over grandeur. The night Taylor Swift crashed her maid's wedding and left every single person in the room in tears.